psychiatrist in one community, and I was giving them an exercise on empathic connection. And I asked them to write down what they would say to people to empathically connect with them who expressed certain things. So one of the things that I said in the role of a patient that came to see them was, "I'm feeling so depressed. I don't know that I want to keep alive. I think the world would be better off without me." And I asked each of them to write down what would be an empathic reaction to this person's statement. I would then ask them to hand in these responses they made, and then I said, "I'm going to read each of these out loud, and I'd like you to raise your hand if you were that person expressing this pain, that you would really feel an empathic connection, an understanding of what you were feeling and needing." Hands were raised to only 3 of the 23 statements that were handed in. It was a powerful learning experience for them. They could see that they hadn't been trained to empathically connect, but to intellectually understand. For example, the most frequent response they made was to ask questions to get further information, such as, "When did this start? What makes you think that you have nothing to offer the world?" So they asked questions to elicit more intellectual understanding of the situation, but didn't empathically connect with what this person might be feeling and needing at the moment they expressed the pain. One woman got very upset because when I read off the statement she made, 2 people groaned in the group, and she turned around and said, "Why would that bother you if someone said that?" Her statement to the other person was, "That's ridiculous. You have everything to offer." She later told me that she was sad that she hadn't learned this earlier in her career, because for 27 years she had been making statements like that to people when they were in pain and thought they were worth nothing. She tried to reassure them that they were worthwhile. And this was the first time, she said, I can see that people could give me honest feedback about that. I can see that a patient that's talking to me and feels bad and I say something that doesn't make them feel better, it would be very hard for them to let me know that. So let's look at some of the most challenging responses that are hard to empathize with. Of course, one of them is when people are diagnosing us, telling us what's wrong with us. When they start with, "The problem with you is that you're too sensitive," or whatever. Now, of course, then if we are going to empathically connect, we don't hear what they think about us. We go to what they might be feeling and needing behind it. I was once in a refugee camp in the Middle East, and when my interpreter announced that I was from the United States, one of the people in the refugee camp jumped to his feet and said to me, "Murderer!" 30 minutes later, he invited me to a Ramadan dinner at his house. Now, what could happen that would transform a situation where he screams at me that I'm a murderer to inviting me to a special dinner at his house? The difference occurred because I empathically connected to what was alive in him at that moment that he called me a murderer. What I said to him was, "Sir, are you feeling furious because your need for safety and support isn't being met by my government?" Now, I didn't know whether that was right or not, whether that's what was alive in him, but from the tone of voice and from some other things that I knew were going on at that moment, I guessed that that was what he might be feeling and needing. The other things that helped me guess were the fact that as I was walking into the refugee camp that day, we had to kick out of the way many empty tear gas grenades which had been fired into the camp the night before, because there had been a riot in this refugee camp. And sadly, on the side of each of these empty tear gas grenades was written, "Made in USA." So now here's a man hearing that I'm from the United States, immediately calls me murderer. So my guess was that, are you angry because your need for support and safety isn't being met by my country? Now, I could have been wrong, but if I was wrong, it focuses on his feelings and needs and will help him to get clear about it. But even more than that, as I've said, it shows that I value what's alive in him. When people trust that you value what's alive in them, what they're feeling and needing at a given moment, that takes more precedence for you than whether what they're saying is right or wrong. This has a big impact on the relationship. It makes compassionate connecting much easier when people really feel that what's alive in them is what matters to you. Now, it often is not going to happen immediately that this shift occurs, and in his case, it didn't appear immediately. It happened that I guessed right this first time. He was angry, and he did have a need for a different kind of support from my country. He was a little shocked at first when I said that, but then that opened him up to say more. And this is what often happens when we empathically connect with a message that comes at us. It gets the person in touch with even more pain that they're experiencing. And when we stay connected to that, they go even deeper. So what he said back to me was, "That's right. We don't have housing. We don't have sewage. Why are you sending your weapons?" Well, now notice, by my focusing on his feelings and needs, he's coming now more from his feelings and needs than calling me a name. So I continued to try to connect with what I heard him feeling and needing by saying, "So, sir, if I'm understanding you, it's enormously painful when your basic needs for things such as sewage and housing aren't being met, and you see weapons being sent." And then he said, "You're darn right. Do you know what it's like to live under these conditions?" And I stayed with his present feelings and needs by saying, "So, sir, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's very, very painful, and you really need some understanding for what it's like to live under these conditions." After this, he was able to hear me, and when I said to him, "Sir, I'm really fearful that because of this association you have with my country, that I'll not get the opportunity I came here for today. I had wanted to share some things valuable for me with you, and I wonder if you'd be willing to hear now what I have to offer." And at that point he was.